Hey there, y'all. Welcome back to Talking Comics with the Toy Vault. I'm Alex.
And I'm Alyssa. This week for our Marvel segment, we're going to be talking about Fantastic Four. And then for DC, we're going to do Sandman. And then for the indie comic, we are going to do Nancy Drew.
We said we'd do it, and we're doing it.
I didn't think it was going to happen that fast, but I'm kind of excited about it.
Okay, so first up, we're doing Fantastic Four. Alyssa, give us a little background on this.
Alright, so this is an issue 1. So if you're looking for something Marvel to jump onto, now's your chance. So basically where this is starting off is that Susan, Reed, and their children are MIA. They've gone into space, and this is kind of the rest of the gang down on Earth trying to figure out how to exist without their counterparts. Well, they're not counterparts, that's not the right word for that.
Family.
They're trying to figure out how to exist without their family. It's definitely the hardest on Johnny, which would make sense because Sue is his sister, so...
And I mean, Johnny doesn't really have much of a life outside of the Fantastic Four. Like, if he isn't the Human Torch, he really isn't anything.
At least like Ben, on the other hand, he's got his girlfriend, and they're adopting some kittens at the beginning of this one. So he's got like pretty much a normal life for a guy that's completely made out of rock, I would say.
He has the most to be upset about in this life, but he's just doing his best to just enjoy everything. And that's what I love about Ben Grimm, the ever-loving blue-eyed thing. Sue, Reed, and their two kids, Franklin and Valeria, have been missing ever since the events of Secret Wars. During Secret Wars, Doctor Doom and Doctor Strange went around to the different universes and attempted to collapse the multiverse into revealing an ancient power that would allow Doom to manipulate the universe, giving him godlike powers. With the fall of the universe, the Fantastic Four created an arc that allowed them to escape with a bunch of other members of the Marvel 616, and then eventually were able to defeat God Doom. But in the process, someone needed to stay behind and fix the universe that was messed up. So Sue, Reed, and their two kids stayed behind to fix the universe, and no one really knows what happened to them after that. So it's just Ben and Johnny trying their best to survive essentially losing their family. So in this issue, it's essentially just split between Ben and Johnny's take on the world. It's Ben, like Alyssa said, like living his best life, and Johnny just trying his best to hold on to the old Fantastic Four. Anything that Johnny can do to be remembered as the Human Torch of the Fantastic Four. He's still the Human Torch, but no FF. And then like cuts back to like them trying to get back to Earth after an adventure, and them just figuring out who's better as a singer, Johnny and Sue. It's Johnny. And then he sings them a song home, which is great. I love it. It's beautiful art leading up to it. And the whole story is just them trying their best to cope while Sue, Reed, and their kids are trying their best to get back to Earth to their family. So Fantastic Four has been missing for a long time. Marvel kind of stopped making it because they didn't want to draw money from the Fox movies, and they kind of wanted to like separate them a bit, so they stopped making the comic. Now that the Fox deal has been going on and now it's finished, they started working and bringing it back. And Dan Slott's Fantastic Four #1, I'm gonna pull it.
It's pretty decent. I'll probably at least read issue 2. I'm intrigued so far, and I'm always kind of a sucker for any sort of arc where a character that's normally portrayed as somebody kind of strong and cocky has some sort of like human side exposed, like Johnny does in this.
It just makes them better characters, because if they're cocky all the time, they're boring.
I like that this sort of dips into Johnny's personality a bit more and shows that he does have a soul. Not that I really want to say that like he kind of does come off as the kind of person who doesn't really care about anything but himself, but obviously he really cares about his sister and his niece and his nephew.
It's the front he has, and it's hard to like sit there and differentiate between Johnny Storm and the Human Torch, because he's always on. He's flamed on. And
that's just him. Like, there's
just...
no sort of alter ego for him, at least. Like, a lot of superheroes in not just Marvel, like in general, like they're very good at being two completely different people that you can't put side by side, but like he's just himself all the time. That's what makes him who he is. Yeah. So to actually see like these different facets of his personality and see that he like does feel and misses his sister and his family and that he's just so desperate to get them back. It's a really good side of him to see. It's very sad, but it's really good.
It's definitely a very fun book, and I don't know about all you people at home, but I've kind of missed the Fantastic Four. Give it a few weeks, and I'll probably say that it's too much, but right now, I've missed them. Welcome back, Fantastic Four. Next up, Alyssa, what do we got?
Next up is our DC book, which is Sandman. It's weird. I mean, you would expect it to be weird because it's Vertigo.
It's Vertigo DC. It's a reboot essentially, or not a reboot. It's a continuation of Neil Gaiman's Sandman. Neil Gaiman's Sandman is an extremely popular book during like the heyday of Vertigo, and it's kind of been missing for a good long while. And this book takes a bunch of writers and artists and teams and gives them little short stories and everything, all written under like a Neil Gaiman script kind of thing. Like Neil Gaiman has a universe. The Sandman isn't just a comic series now; it's a whole universe with different branching stories that are coming out of it, which will be an interesting thing to see. It's a very weird book and sometimes hard to follow in certain spots, but it's very referential to like older media. Like you won't know a lot of stuff if you didn't read some of the older Sandman Vertigo stuff. Like there's an arc about Tim Hunter and he's a character from the books of magic and everything like that. Like Lucifer from the Lucifer Vertigo series. So it's definitely one of those series that references back to its source material a lot and kind of makes you feel like you need to go back and read, which you definitely should. Sandman is a very great series, but it's kind of reliant on the fact that you need to read the older stuff to know. It tries its best to reintroduce these characters or introduce you to concepts of stuff, but it's very much wanting you to go back and read the old Vertigo books, which you definitely should.
Before we get too deep into it, I feel like I should probably point out that this is definitely a mature book.
Yes.
It does say for mature audiences right on the cover, but after reading it, it definitely isn't for children. It's definitely for an adult comic enjoying audience. I mean, there's a couple of F-bombs in there. Other than that, there's like a pretty decent amount of cursing. There's a couple of scenes where there's some nudity. Obviously, they're drawings. It's artistic nudity. But I mean, it's not for everyone.
This is definitely like a mature version of the DC stuff. It's Vertigo. If you've ever read older Vertigo, it's for the mature audiences. So parents, be advised, this book is not for kids. But for you parents out there, it's a great series, or return to a really great series. And I, for one, even though this is a super weird book, am excited to see Neil Gaiman come back and write this universe.
I'm really confused about it so far, but I also have not read any of the Vertigo books, so I don't recognize really the characters. I don't really necessarily have that excitement of seeing familiar faces in it. I'm just seeing it for exactly what it is at the moment. But, I mean, I'm intrigued so far. Like, a lot of this is pretty much, it seems like, set up. Like, they want you to know who people are, what they're doing. But for the most part, it takes place in the dreaming. That's what they call it. So there's basically all these characters that can actually interact with people while they're in the dreaming, which is what happens when you go to sleep. It seems to me, as far as I can follow, that the only things that can really go between like actual reality and dreams are these ravens. I don't know if that's just me being confused or not.
And if you're like us who haven't read an older title like Sandman and all the other Vertigo stuff, but are looking to get back into it, check out trades. Trades are great. They make so many different versions and versions of the trades, and that's what I'm going to do. So even though we had a kind of a lighter knowledge on Sandman, we give you plenty of information to kind of like go and check out the history, because this book is that book is very drenched in history.
Jumping into a new comic can be super intimidating, especially in universes like Marvel and DC, where there's so many tie-ins and different stories that have happened in the past. And there's usually a lot of reading that comes with even starting in issue 1, because it usually ties into something that's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, at least this way, you're kind of getting a perspective from somebody who also has no idea what they're getting themselves into going into an issue 1. I mean, don't ever be discouraged to pick up a new comic, even if it's something that's already a little bit deep in. I mean, you might not know what's going on when you first get into it, but if you're interested in the storyline and you find even a little bit of intrigue with the characters, there's always a way to find the back issues, or to find a trade, or to find a way to catch up with the story. And I mean, if it's characters that you really like, then the more the better. It's like finding out that TV show on Netflix has like 12 seasons that you can just watch.
Exactly. So that's the great thing about comics. Just check it out.
Actually, before we get into Nancy Drew as our independent, just because I know we're going to go on and on about Nancy Drew, I'm going to bring up really quick this free book that appeared at our stores that is called Rolled and Told. It is an issue 1. It's a free issue. It comes from Lion Forge, which I guess is another one of the independents that is upcoming. But this is actually pretty cool. It's got basically a mini comic in it, and then a bunch of pieces that you can use to actually create your own Dungeons and Dragons adventure. It's got a map. It's got ideas for characters, NPCs, for different adventures that you can send them on. Right on the back it says it's got articles offering tips and tricks for budding game masters. So if you're somebody who's looking into, DMing your own game or starting to play, like, this might actually be one that's really cool to get into. They're going to be doing it once a month, and it's going to be different every single time. This issue 1 obviously is completely free, so it's definitely worth picking up, but I think it's pretty interesting. And I mean, like, if you are looking into it, I mean, like, our game store does Adventure League. How many times a week? I don't even know.
Every Wednesday at 6 o'clock, we do Adventure League. And also, for those of you Connecticut bound, the Crystal Mall location has started doing Adventure League on Tuesdays at 5.
So, I mean, it might be a good way to get into doing that sort of thing. And it's a little bit of reading, too. So, it's interesting. It's a comic and a guidebook all in one. So, here we are with the indie comics. Dynamite. Nancy Drew, number 3.
Are you saying this book is Dynamite, or are you saying that's the company?
The company that makes it is Dynamite, but arguably this book is also Dynamite.
Solid. This book is written by Kelly Thompson, and the art's done by Jen St. Ange. They are some of my favorite creative aspects of comics currently on the shelves. Kelly Thompson's writing a few books for Marvel right now. She wrote the Kate Bishop Hawkeye series. She did a few of the annuals for Star Wars. She's currently doing West Coast Avengers, which should be hitting the shelves in a couple months. Jen St. Ange does a few arts for certain things. The last thing she did was the Gem and the Holograms Misfits 6-issue series with Kelly Thompson. So I'm glad I read that, and I'm glad to see them back doing Nancy Drew. Another classic piece of media modernized and brought into the comics world, which has so far been amazing.
When I was a kid, the Nancy Drew books were some of my absolute favorite books to read, that and the Hardy Boys. So, I mean, seeing it in comic form was really, really exciting to me, and especially exciting that I still feel like I can relate to it and understand it, even though it's geared towards a younger audience than me, I would say.
But it is still teen plus. For languages and graphic themes, such as, death and crime-solving natures of the murder mystery. It's Nancy Drew. So,
if you're familiar with Nancy Drew, it's exactly that. It just has pictures to go along with it.
yeah, so there's your warning for younger audiences out there. It is a book geared towards a younger audience, but at the same time, due to the nature of the book, it is still recommended to be a teen plus. So the series starts off with Nancy Drew mid crime solving, not in Bayport. She moved away many years ago, and she's just living her life until a letter comes that forces her to come back to Bayport, where she reunites with Bess, George, and the Hardy Boys themselves, Frank and Joe. The letter brings her back to Bayport, where this whole series kind of takes place. This first arc is about that letter and the consequences of her returning to Bayport after all these years and dealing with the unresolved issues that she's had with her mother's untimely and uncrimed death. Her death was an accident. It wasn't a crime, and that kind of racks with Nancy, and that's kind of a driving force of her character in this series.
Nancy is a person who's very, very logical. She's very good at finding, pieces of the puzzle and putting them together. So I think it's really interesting to watch somebody like that trying to rationalize something that she absolutely can't rationalize. And it kind of digs into that, where she's kind of coming to the understanding that there's just no way for her to make sense of it. Like, it's absolutely shattering for her, and there's nothing that she can do about it, and no way that she can actually make it make sense. It's just sad and it hurts. And I mean, I feel like that's something that a lot of young readers can probably relate to.
It's a very relatable topic.
I mean, like, it's very, very sad, but I mean, it's a good way to at least feel for like a second while you're reading, like maybe other people are going through the same thing. You're not alone. But one of the things that I really, really like about this comic, as somebody who loved the Nancy Drew books so much, is her inner monologue is expressed through these little notebook pages that appear on the panels.
It's so good. Like the little dialogue and everything, like inner dialogue, monologue. It's a little detail, but it makes me love this series all the much more. Also, the fact that like all these character designs aren't like your classic like old chum kind of like 20s attire, like how it was initially written back in the day. Like, this is a modernized version of Nancy Drew. So all these characters look like teens from like the 2018. They look like real teenagers in this modern time. It's subtle, and it's not detrimenting any of their characters or their personalities or anything like that. It just works and makes sense.
I love it. This I'm definitely gonna pull. I'm already pulling it.
I'm already pulling it. I love Nancy Drew. But if Kelly Thompson and Jen St. Ange were to write anything else, I'm still gonna be on it. Like, definitely go and check out some of their works. It's very well done, and West Coast Avengers, like I said, is coming out soon. It's gonna be good. I'm calling it right now.
I'll probably pull that too, just because I'm really, really into the Nancy Drew, so I feel like I trust it.
Oh my god. Kelly Thompson can do no wrong, in my opinion. She's the new Mark Waid, and that's saying a lot. Mark Waid did so much for comics, both Marvel and DC, throughout the years. He created the Speed Force for the Flash. He gave us Impulse. He did so much for comics. And like anytime Mark Waid writes a book, I'm like, all right. He made Archie good. Like, him and Fiona Staples rebooted the new Archie, and it was great. Like, I never thought I'd be so excited to read a new issue of Archie.
The new Archie's interesting.
It's great.
It's not that same, like, campy comic that you remember buying at, like, the grocery store when you were waiting in line or something with your parents when you were younger.
Nor is it, like, the darkness of, like, Riverdale, like, on the CW or anything like that. It's very much similar to Nancy Drew, where it's just modern versions of this classic series brought into a really well done version of itself. It's a very good series. So check out Archie.
And it's the characters you actually remember, instead of like Riverdale, where they might have the likeness and the names of the characters you remember, but it's nothing like the Archie comic.
Nancy Drew is a really solid book. Alyssa says she's pulling it. I'm pulling it already, like I said. And also, the best thing about getting single issues is that you get the sweet covers. And Tula Late does the cover A's for Nancy Drew, and they're just gorgeous. Oh my god, are they gorgeous.
One of my favorite things about pulling single issues of comics is getting those variants and getting to see different styles from different artists that you wouldn't normally get. And I mean, to me, there's just something much more exciting about pulling singles than there are about pulling things like trades and compendiums. It's kind of the difference between watching episodes when they first air on TV or waiting to binge them all on Netflix.
Exactly.
There are certain shows that I don't care enough about to watch the night that they come out, and I will wait so I can just binge them all at once. But there are other shows that, like, that's my 9 p.m., Game of Thrones being one of them. But I mean, like, it's cool to me that I've found so many comics that I am invested in enough to actually pull them weekly, and before I started working for the Toy Vault, that wasn't the case. I was only pulling Harley Quinn. So, honestly, like, it makes a big difference, especially when you have people, like the people who work at our stores, that get to know you and learn the kind of titles that you like to pull, and we can suggest other really cool titles for you. And I mean, with the 20% off, like, it makes it totally worth it. Even if you do decide to wait for the trade, you'll still get that 20% off, and you'll probably find something that you would have never even thought you would enjoy that ends up being your new favorite thing.
I've definitely had a lot of those interactions with my coworkers and just customers, too. A lot coming in. They tell me about their favorite series. I'll go and check that out, and I'll tell other people about it. So if you're looking for, like, a good recommendation or trying to find a good place to start somewhere new and something in a comic, you know, ask someone at the Toy Vault. I'm sure one of us will be able to point you in the direction you're looking to go.
Absolutely. I feel like for the most part, our entire staff is at least somewhat interested in comics.
All right, next week, we got new books coming out next Wednesday. Alyssa, what are you looking forward to? What are you looking at?
So first of all, I'm really looking forward to the book Pearl that's coming out. It's about a tattoo artist who also works for the Yakuza. So that's something that I'm super hyped about because it sounds just weird enough to totally have my attention, and it's a Bendis book, so...
DC owns Bendis now, so yeah.
No surprises there, I guess. Jughead the Hunger's also dropping, which is pretty cool. Again, like, tying back to, like, that whole Riverdale thing, if you're kind of a fan of seeing your favorite characters in weird, super dark scenarios, Jughead the Hunger is absolutely bananas. Like, the whole thing is about angry werewolf Jughead. So, I mean, if that's something you've always wanted and things you write fan fiction about, it's a real comic that you could totally pick up. If you're like me and you actually really enjoyed the Star Wars Solo movie, then there is a one-shot dropping that is just about Beckett. So you could always pick that up.
I am super excited about the new Extermination series, number 1 dropping next week. It's the new X crossover, and I feel like X-Men's been kind of in a weird spot lately. Some of the best books are not even like the main series books, but they have some really good characters. So if you like X-Men, check out Extermination. Next up, Justice League number 6. Justice League's been a super good series throughout the entire thing, and I just really love like Lex Luthor leading the Legion of Doom. I love me some Lex Luthor, and it's been great so far. Also, Jorge Jimenez is phenomenal penciler. His art is so good. If you haven't checked out any of his stuff, he does a lot of the covers for the Super Sun series. He did a few of the issues for Justice League No Justice. This is his like first real big like monthly series. So check out his stuff. It's very good. And then lastly, Flavor. It's an indie image book about kind of like a small town in like a weird fantasy world where it's like a dystopian government controlling the people, and their only outlet is like through cooking, but it's also like weirdly fantasy with giant swords and monsters, but also like cooking competitions. So it's a weird mix of like Hunger Games meets like Miyazaki style films meets like Anne Alton Brown's Cutthroat Kitchen, kind of mixed all together into one weirdly great series. So definitely check it out when you get a chance.
Are there recipes in it?
I think so. But well, on the creative team staff is an actual like licensed chef, so like everything is like detailed correctly. So when they're talking about it, so it's kind of has recipes in the actual like dialogue when they're talking. Like this is like fact checked by like someone who knows what they're doing, like a famous culinary artist in California, owns many restaurants. So definitely check out Flavor. It's very good.
That's cool.
So I think that ends this week's episode of Talking Comics with the Toy Vault. I've been Alex.
And I'm Alyssa.
And we'll see you guys next week.